She won most talkative in high school, and she has been running her mouth ever since. Welcome to the Lisa Fisher Said podcast with your host, Lisa Fisher.
Okay, kids, she really is my long-lost sister. We have ethnic similarities. We have interests in the same things. And so when did you give up hooch? Because I have totally lost interest. It interrupts my sleep, and it ages the heck out of you, and I'm not interested.
I just have to tell you, when you say hooch, I thought you were talking about sex. And I was like, wait, I didn't give that up. But okay, so going back to
hooch is
alcohol.
An old-timey term for
it's a Southern thing for alcohol, right?
Yeah.
Up here, we're like, we go to the packy store. Do you say you go to the hooch store down there?
Well, I do.
Kind of,
I have my own language. It's a Lisa Fisher language. No one else says it, but yes, packy store. So when did you decide it was in best interest for your life and for your virility and for your future to quit drinking alcohol?
Okay, so my father-in-law had a birthday. My second child, I had 4 children, so I hadn't had 2 of them yet. My second child was about a year. And we went to a Japanese restaurant, and I single-handedly drank a bottle of sake. And it was amazing. And I wasn't hungover. Okay, so before you say to me, oh, you must have been hungover. I wasn't. I woke up and I was like, I feel awful. But I felt awful for a month. It took me a month to recover.
Are you serious?
Serious, no joke. And I said, okay, self, you obviously have adrenal fatigue. And I was an OBGYN at the time, so I knew I had adrenal fatigue. But clearly, if a lot of alcohol does this to you, a little alcohol, you're gonna have to work with like my twisted way of thinking. If a lot is doing nasty stuff, a little bit is doing nasty stuff on a smaller scale. Yeah. So until I can drink a lot and not react, I'm not going to drink any. And I stopped. And that was 17 years ago.
17 years ago.
17 years ago. And then I got into toxins.
Yeah.
And, so Lisa, if I said to you, hey, Lisa, I have a big old glass of toxin for you. Would you like some? It's just going to make you feel terrible.
Heck no.
Mess with your gut. But most people would think I was like a crazy chick if I did that. But when you drink alcohol, that's what you get. So I'm now vindicated, right? Many years later, I'm vindicated, but I originally stopped because I didn't feel well when I drank it. And I'm not such a drinker that I was like, oh, I need to have my whiskey on the rocks. I didn't like it. So I stopped.
Yeah. I kind of miss sometimes the flavor. So I did order.
Of Manischewitz.
Well, no, exactly. People in the Jewish community understand that. But I ordered the Curious Elixirs. It's a fake alcohol that you can put in a cup and have limes just to have a bite of something. It has no alcohol content. And that's when my husband asked if I was going to start smoking fake cigarettes. I said I might. But it's just because sometimes, not that I don't have the habit of clinking a glass, but sometimes I want a Shirley Temple for grownups. Yeah. And so I just got the package yesterday. I'm going to try it and see how we do. I do get tempted, though. I was at a cooking class last night, and part of the ticket price was having a glass of wine. But I just say every time, it's not worth it. So I say no. Not that I'm a martyr, but I say no so I can sleep. Sleep has gotten to be the most important thing of my life, more than what I'm going to eat or what's on TV. Yeah.
Sleep is God, man. Like sleep is priceless. So I feel
so let's go back in our thinking. I've always said that the people the PR team for kale was brilliant because they made us think we needed it, and it made me toot like a bear in the woods because it's just too cruciferous because I would make this much of it and I'd make them into we would chop it up and make it taste like popcorn, and we called it toot corn because it's too cruciferous for my body, right? So I always said kale had a great PR team. Red wine did in the 90s and early 2000s because every person at the Shady Pines old folks home was told to have a little glass of wine for longevity. Where now we're realizing, like so many studies, follow the money. So we've made a switch. What do you think now you've been on this curious wagon for 17 years, but when do you think we started realizing that wine is full of toxins?
Yeah, I talk to so many people, Lisa, who are still like, wait, wine is bad for me? I'm like, well, I don't know that I would ever argue that alcohol is good for you, right? Like
They used
unless
to.
you're sterilizing a wound, right? Like that's useful.
Right.
That would be useful. But otherwise, it diverts the liver from doing what it's supposed to be doing, which is taking the toxins out of your body and getting them out of you so that you can feel freaking amazing and live long and prosper and blah, blah, blah. Okay. So I think a lot of people don't realize that red wine and white wine are full of pesticides and toxins and contaminants. And it's really pretty scary. There's a couple brands that are reasonable. They have less sugar. They're grown organically. They still will spike your blood sugar. It is still toxic.
Yeah.
But it's less toxic, right? If you're
I've heard they're terrible.
I don't drink, so I haven't tried it. My husband tried it when we were at a conference. He's like, it's not bad. I'm like, not bad is not good. You know, I don't know. I don't drink, so I can't comment on that. But I think I'm always about perfection isn't real, and you want to make a better choice.
Yeah.
So if your better choice is go for an organically grown, lower sugar alcohol and then drink less of it, or make it a wine spritzer instead of a glass of wine, I'm all for that rather than 2 or 3 glasses of wine, which are not healthy for you. No. Straight up bad for you.
No. I would say for me that my wine consumption, I didn't do the COVID drinking. I did the opposite in COVID. I worked out harder, smarter, and I got out of the house because I'm
There's
an
only
extrovert.
2 camps, right?
Yeah,
either you got worse or got better.
That's right. So I didn't, and no judgment. I'm just saying extroverts like to go out and see people. We would fight over who was going to get the mail at the mailbox because I had to go out and see humans. But I didn't do all the drinking. My drinking, and it was a bottle of wine a week for about a couple of years. It was during the throes of menopause and heart palpitations. Mm-hmm. I thought I would pop open the red wine on a Thursday, have 2 glasses Thursday, 2 Friday, 1 Saturday.
Yeah.
I did that for maybe a couple of years. I mean, I don't think every week, but I'm saying I had wine at home and I did that. And I thought it was going to make the heart palpitations better. Explain to our listeners why it didn't, because it didn't.
It didn't. Yeah. Okay. Let's back up a step. A bottle of wine has about 750 calories. So if you do that even 40 times a year, that's 28,000 calories you didn't need. I just did 4 times 7 and then add a bunch of zeros. I knew it wasn't 2,800. So then I had another 0. No, it's not exact. Okay. If you're a math person, you're like, no, that's not right. But it's more than 28,000 calories in a year. And that's going to add up. Right. I always felt like, why drink your calories? Okay. Back to the heart palpitations. So, when you drink alcohol, a whole cascade of things happen. But one of them that happens is when you drink alcohol, it stresses the adrenals. Mm-hmm. And the adrenals are these tiny little glands. Look like up in the air junior birdsman, but it's these tiny little munchkin glands that sit on top of your kidneys, and they provide your energy, your get up and go, your ability to function. So when you drink alcohol, if you eat sugar, if you're super stressed, you almost get in a car accident, you have a toxic boss, whatever, the adrenals kick into gear. And when your adrenals get stressed enough, you can have heart palpitations. And it's so interesting. Women will sit in my office and say, Doc, I think I have a heart problem. I'm like, no, you don't have a heart problem. You have an alcohol problem, or you have a stress problem, because that's the impact of it.
Which came first? Did my heart palpitations, or was I perpetuating heart palpitations by thinking I was relieving it with the alcohol?
Yeah. So probably you started with a component of adrenal fatigue. And, from the little you shared with me before we started recording, it's a pretty good bet to think that you have had years and years of adrenal stress. Yes, right?
Yes.
So by the time you get to menopause and you start to get less resilient and less elastic, then anything sets you off. So you already had it, but then when you drink the alcohol, you flare it. You make it sort of magnified.
That was the time. I've been in radio TV since the earth cooled. And that was the time I was getting up at 3:45 or 4 a.m. in the morning to host a morning radio show. So it would be like at 2 p.m. that my husband came in. I was drinking wine, and he was like, "Really?" And he's not judgy; he's funny.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere, girl. Like,
that's what I said. I got up at 4, but that was part of that time of my life. And I'm telling you, Wendie, there wasn't anyone that would listen when I would say, I'm having trouble sleeping with heart palpitations. One guy gave me trazodone, and then they wanted to give me an antidepressant and all that. But I was like, I'm not depressed. I mean, I wasn't depressed. I just had heart. I was going through menopause, and I was perimenopause, and no one told me those words.
We need to talk about this. Okay. Can we pause for a minute and talk about this? I literally, not even an hour ago, had a patient in my office who said to me, she said to her doctor, I want to see a menopause specialist. And he said,
you're setting it up where it's not going to be that. I hope he doesn't live through the day, but what did he say?
Not listening. He said, what's a menopause specialist?
No,
Why would you need that?
No, he didn't.
I'm like nails on a chalkboard. Did he really say that to you? Like,
does he have the internet? I mean, isn't he a medical doctor? Doesn't he know this?
This is not 10 years ago. So for the listeners, don't let people gaslight you.
Yes.
Okay. You know that something's not right.
Yes.
And what I said to the patient who said that to me was, okay, we're going to give a lot of leeway to this human because clearly they're living in the dark ages. But anyone who says to you, it's nothing, you're just getting older, maybe you're just anxious, or it's not as bad as it seems, that's gaslighting, okay? And you don't let them do that. If people say that to you, that's your message. You're in the wrong place. You're asking the wrong person for directions, okay?
That's
you're
right.
asking the person who just moved there and doesn't speak the language for directions.
Or a blind person.
A blind
person,
do I get to navigate.
That person is blind. I totally agree with that.
So if you're having this experience, A, trust yourself. B, look for another person to ask guidance for.
Yeah.
Go online and look for a functional medicine specialist. Go to ifm.org. Do not let yourself be gaslighted because here we are. This has been years that she's been sick. And I was outraged. And my outraged is this.
Oh,
she saw my face. I was like, I'm outraged. Yes. And I don't want to badmouth someone, but I'm outraged. No. So don't let that happen to you. And if it does, just know they're not bad people. They just don't have the tools in the toolbox to help you. Go somewhere else. Don't ask your electrician to do your plumbing or vice versa. Go somewhere else.
Well, to simplify it, that doctor is ignorant. He is ignorant he's ignoring the facts. He's ignoring the science. He's ignoring the movement. There's a movement now, and maybe it's because I'm of the age, and maybe it's because social media is the great voice that speaks to us. But now we are seeing women, Wendie, lock arms and say, I'm mad as hell and I'm not taking it anymore. And they're saying, you've got to give me help. So what's the first thing, what's the first bit of advice you told that patient that was practical that she could enact that day? Besides, obviously mindset is very, very important. Sure. But what do you want us to do when we're told that? What's the first thing we should do?
Well, I think you need to first understand that what you're going through is first off an expected stage of life. It's not a pathological stage intrinsically, but it can have some consequences that are unpleasant.
Yeah.
So menopause isn't a pathological state, but the brain fog, the hot flashes, the insomnia, the evil mood changes, those are problems we need to address. The menstrual abnormalities. So it's like there's nothing wrong with you, and there's things that we might need to support you in. Sort of distinguish that. So the action items for me, I'm all about, we need to address your foundations before we can get to the next step. So what's a foundation? Food. You do it every day. You are what you eat. Pooping. You need to do it every day.
Oh, yes.
Even if you don't feel like it, whatever, right? Every day, sometimes more than once. You need to move your body, preferably every day. And when you become a woka, a woman of a certain age, you're a woka. When you become that human, you need a mix of cardiovascular to support your heart and weights to support your strength and your bones. So it's not just like, oh yeah, I spin every day. Cool. Well, that's not really helping your bones. That's helping your heart. So do the right exercises. You need to think. You need to get present. You need to get clear. I really feel like a lot of divorces happen when we become a woka because we realize like, okay, who I was when I got married is no longer who I'm meant to be. And it's really just about, this is the next phase of life. So thinking, connecting to people, being intimate with people, sleeping, breathing. These are the foundations. You need to fix your foundations. And within that, understand, what is your chemistry saying? Are you deficient in things that will mess with you?
So what's your go-to labs? Is it the Dutch? Is
Yeah.
it the saliva test? Blood,
It's
blood
all of the
work?
above. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the foundational exam includes traditional blood work that looks at your minerals, nutrients, hormones. I tested that patient for celiac. I'm going to do
Good.
a thrombotic workup on her. So it's really, and it's a dual track. I say to people, I'm looking at what's torturing you now. Maybe you're severely deficient in zinc. That'll mess your skin up. Maybe you're severely deficient in D. That'll make you anxious and
Oh,
immune
yeah.
system dysfunction. So I'm looking for what's going on, but I'm also looking at what's your risk factor for cardiovascular disease, heart attack, stroke, Alzheimer's, metabolic dysfunction. That's just blood work. Then I also, as part of the foundational work, look at your spit kit for adrenal function.
Okay.
I'm looking at your stool test for gut. My favorite
Okay.
one is the GI effects because I just, not only can I often get a lot of it covered, but it gives me this massive breadth of information that's clinically relevant. And then I'm looking at food sensitivities to understand what are you eating with good intentions that has bad outcomes. And then I'm looking at your metabolomics, also by Genova, that looks at your antioxidants, your B vitamins, some of your screening for toxins and mitochondrial dysfunction. And that's level one, right? That's round one. And then round two is all the toxic work. So heavy metals, mycotoxins, other environmental toxins, glyphosate.
Well, we just get our PhD if we're a patient of yours within about 2 months.
You're a smart cookie, man. I mean, yeah.
The data, it just shows it's the whole test, don't guess. It's
Yes.
the data that really makes us so unique. And we all know that if you've ever birthed a child, how different they are from you. You share
Mhm.
some DNA, but it doesn't mean that you express the DNA the same way.
Right. Right. I say to patients, I'm a data hog. I like the data and I'm happy to go empirically. You know, if you say to me, coming here was a stretch and I don't have any funds left
Yeah.
to do all this testing, then I say, okay, cool. I can go empirically and we can tinker with you. But I would much rather have the data so I understand. You don't have
What do
to
you
though.
like about, like, I've done the gene profiles that kind of
Mhm.
show, that I've MTHFR or COMT gene. What do you like about those testing, and which is your preferred source?
Well, I like all of them, but I really encourage people to do an outside the system test. And what I mean by that is something that you just go and pay for yourself. And unless you give it to your doctor, doesn't wind up in your medical record because we can argue about the merits of universal health care, but if everyone is able to get health care, you don't need to worry about being penalized
Different.
or discriminated
Yeah.
against. So
Right.
until we have some type of protection, I'm a
Good
huge
point.
fan of not putting your genetic information into your medical chart unless you have to. I mean, there's certain
Good.
things you won't be discriminated against, but then there's certain things like 40% of the population has the celiac gene. So they're not discriminating against you for that. But if you get celiac, you're discriminated against because your risk of death from all causes is higher. The actuaries know that.
Oh,
So I'm a huge
I
fan of
see.
like Ancestry and 23andMe
Mm-hmm.
because you have control over that data.
Mm-hmm.
They do anonymous testing. That doesn't bother me. I've had some people say, "Oh, they test on you." I'm like, "Well, it's anonymous. Nobody knows who you are." So that doesn't personally bother me. So I'm a huge fan of that. I love the Nordic DNA test. That's a
Okay.
fantastic test. It also has great reporting, right? And
Okay.
then we're sort of peripheral. I love the Gallery test, which is a test that looks at whether you're expressing the methylation signals for 50 different cancers. And that's
Okay.
active cancer. That's not a risk.
Wow.
That's not a genetic mutation. That is, do you have this cancer in your body right now? So I'm a huge fan of that test. Not covered by insurance, unfortunately. But so there's a lot of different ones, but I'm also very pragmatic, right? Like I don't see why you should spend $800 to get something that you could spend $150 for. So that's why I also lean towards a 23andMe and Ancestry type things.
Yeah. Well, in your neck of the woods, I've interviewed the revered Dr. Thomas Seyfried, and understand from Boston College, understanding about the metabolic mitochondrial connection to cancers. I don't feel like I'm on fire and that I'm going to get cancer. I mean, because I have so much control, I'm an intermittent faster, my fasting insulin's super low. But I do know, because I was kind of reading some things online last night, because of my DNA and yours too, we share Ashkenazi DNA, and there is a BRCA gene connection to that.
Mm-hmm.
Would that make, like, I've never tested because I kind of don't want to know, because I'll manifest it. Like, I'll think about it and all of a sudden
Right.
I'll grow a third boob and it'll be cancerous because, I'll overthink it. I don't want to know if I have Graves' disease because I'll you know what I'm saying? Because I'm
Right.
Hashimoto's. So I don't want to put my head in the sand. I want to be wise, but have you worried at all, or have you tested to see if you're BRCA because of our genetic predisposition?
Yeah, I am someone who believes deeply in the data that I can collect that would alter my behavior.
Okay, I see that.
So when
yes.
I did the 23andMe, I said, I do want to know about the BRCA. I do want to know about Parkinson's risk. I do want to know about Alzheimer's risk because it would alter my behavior, right? I already do the same stuff as you, right? The exercise, the intermittent fasting. I don't eat gluten. I don't eat
Right.
cow's dairy.
Same.
Unless it's A2. I don't eat sugar.
Right.
I don't drink alcohol. Like, we do all these
Right.
good things, right? But for example, there's this new imaging out that I'm trying to get into my center, which is called QT imaging, and it's
Yes.
breast imaging,
Yes.
and it's 40 times more resolution than like an MRI.
Yes.
That, if I had the BRCA gene, I actually have a friend who has the BRCA gene, and I was like, as soon as I get this, you're coming to my center and we're going to image you, because she hasn't yet had a mammogram. And I'm like, we want to know. It's so much more resolution. We'll be able to see what's happening in there. So I'm a fan of testing because it would change my behavior. I would, and instead of sort of, I ebb and flow, right? As a human being, sometimes I'm like, I never eat gluten, but sometimes I'll eat something that's packaged. And I might not do that if I knew that my risk for cancer was much higher, because cancer is an inflammatory state.
Right.
So it
for
would
sure.
alter my behavior, right?
For
so
sure.
I did test for everything. And I know I have 2 copies of the MTHFR C677, and I have 2 copies for celiac and 2 copies for D deficiency. My poor kids, I'm like, y'all are screwed.
I know.
That's it.
I tell mine that all the time.
Yeah. And I didn't know that celiac was genetic until I got it and had all these kids. And then I learned that it was genetic, and I had definitely given kids. I sat and cried. I was like, what did I do? I'm glad they're here. They're just treats in the world, but it's genetic. So
Yes.
I did test, and it does change my behavior.
So I've done Ancestry and 23andMe. Is BRCA in those?
Yeah. BRCA's in 23andMe. You, I think, have to say, yes, you want to know. So you could go back and say, I want to know.
Okay. Yeah.
And the ApoE3, ApoE4 for Alzheimer's, you can say, yeah, I want to know about those.
Yeah. I think I remember not having that. And I think I've done Boston Heart. Maybe Boston Heart had something that was, or something else I did at that time. So I'm going to look all that up, because I do want to know for if we talk about the epigenetics of switching the gene on and off, and I'm doing everything I can to keep those genes at bay, but I do like a little bite of dark chocolate every day. If I knew that I was facing the enemy in the camp, then it would probably be the thing that I'd realize that is a hot plate. I don't need to touch it. It will burn me.
There's more to that though, Lisa. So if you knew that you were at risk, I mean, you have autoimmune disease, I have autoimmune disease. So toxins play a massive role in autoimmune disease, right? And so my poor husband, he's the nicest guy. And at one point, I think he thought that I was crazy. And then we start to see all this data. But even back in 1989, Massachusetts came out with this evaluation study that showed that 1 out of every 6 deaths could be tracked back to air or water quality. Hello, this is almost 40 years ago. They knew it almost then, but we don't live like this, right? So if you really were facing it and said, okay, I need to do everything, you would also then make sure that every room in your house had an air filter, that you filtered your water, that you never drink out of plastic water bottles, that you did hardcore detox. You test your metals, your mycotoxins, you test it all, and you resolve what you can, right? I stopped doing my nails. Damn near killed me.
You did?
I did. I used to have the most gorgeous, I did it myself, laid with my hands on top of the comforter on a Sunday night. My husband was like, really? but I had high levels of the chemicals in my body. And after losing half the hair on my head and gaining a whole bunch of weight and having a rash and fatigue and brain fog, I'm like, you know what? This is not worth it. Not worth it.
Wow.
Now, I'm not saying everyone has to stop doing their nails, but for me, I wanted to peel off every possible thing that was messing with me because I was so sick, right? The sicker you are, the more intervention and invasive you're going to get. And then the more you're just like, oh, this is a nice idea. You could leave your nail polish for last if it's a nice idea and you just want to be healthy, right? Depends how sick you are.
So that's your pain to purpose story then? Is that what got you involved? So you left kind of conventional Western medicine and thought, I'm going to go fight for people?
Yeah. So I came to functional medicine because my husband was being mentored by a functional medicine doctor. And right before our insurance changed when I was 35, he said to me, why don't you go see him before our insurance changes? Because we couldn't afford to see him otherwise, right? We were both just out of med school and paying off our loans. Like, we didn't have any money.
Right.
And so I went to see him, and he's the one who diagnosed me with celiac and a number of food sensitivities and mineral nutrient deficiencies and helped me understand why I had taken iron for 20 years and it hadn't done anything. It's because I wasn't absorbing it.
Right.
So he was the person who introduced me to functional medicine. And about 3 years later, I left my OBGYN practice and went in with my husband, who had opened a functional medicine practice. And so that was my entry. And then pain to purpose, next level. It's like a camel hump, right? The first one was getting diagnosed with celiac. The second one was at age 48 when I came back from a vacation to France, and I got so sick, Lisa. Like, what I referred to was the weight gain, the hair loss, the eczema, the rash, the brain fog, the fatigue. It was exhaustion and gut irritability, like you name it. And ultimately learned that when Notre Dame burned, it released 500 tons of lead dust into the atmosphere. And the closer you were to Notre Dame, the more you got.
Gosh.
I was there the week after it burned. And as soon as I came home, I got sick. And I had no idea what was going on. And so that's the really big part of my pain to purpose, because what I saw was, as the poster child for healthy living, all the stuff we do, it wasn't enough. When I got that nasty exposure, it wasn't enough. And so that's when I tested the heavy metals, the lead, the mercury, the thallium, the arsenic, the cadmium, and then also tested mycotoxins. I had lead, I had mercury, I had 5 strains of mycotoxins. Those are that's the name for the toxins that the mold puts out when it's in your body. It's totally creepy. And I had a whole slew of the environmental toxins, including that nail polish, flame retardant. So I stopped pumping my own gas. MTBE, which is the gasoline fumes, flame retardants, plastic, styrene. I had all just like crazy stuff. And I said to my husband, I'm such a dirty girl. And we're going to write that book.
Truthfully, Wendie, that's why you couldn't tolerate alcohol. You couldn't have had one more thing for your liver was going, Wendie, give us a break.
Exactly. I was teetering for years, but I didn't know this, Lisa. You know, that like I didn't know, because we say these things like, oh, I'm just getting older, or everyone in my family has it, or I just have bad genes, or, you know, all those things that you say. Right. But really it was just, I don't have good detox. And I'm a child of the 70s. Yeah. And then the 80s with the microwaves and the plastic and blah, 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 and the high stress and OBGYN.
So is that due then to your pathways? Because I'm understanding now, I mean, a little bit, because it's way bigger than my brain could understand. Is it your pathways don't give you a good detox, and it's different from maybe the way your husband does it, or your mother does it, or your next door neighbor does it?
Yeah. And first off, don't talk about yourself like that. Like, you're a smart cookie. And maybe you don't have a PhD in like pathways, but it's hard stuff. True. It's hard, but like, you're smart. So, okay. Yeah. All of the above. Think of it like a soup. And here we are with the multiple copies of the MTHFR and the 2 copies of the vitamin D deficiency and the 2 copies for celiac disease, being a child of the 70s, eating a lot of gluten, back up, being a child who had pneumonia at 6 months old, and then stacked ear infection, strep throat.
Did your parents smoke? That's when everybody smoked too. My parents smoked.
They didn't smoke. But, you know, we never looked at like what kind of paint were we using, what kind of VOC. I grew up in homes that had lead pipes. They got rid of those, but then there was lead paint, lead in the gasoline. And, you do construction on those kind of homes. So there were just all of these layers, right? It's like death by 1,000 cuts, standing under the waterfall. Every drop of water is an individual toxin. And so when you layer the genetics on with all the exposures and with 40 years of mercury fillings, I had like 6 fillings in my mouth, along with eating a lot of gluten and having these 2 genes and eating food that was microwaved in plastic, and then going into med school, which is stressful, and then going into OBGYN, which is extremely stressful, and then having fertility challenges made up for that. You start to layer these things on. By the time I hit perimenopause, I had no more elasticity in my rubber band.
Yeah.
And that's when I really went off the skids. So it's all of the above, because you put all these ingredients in the soup and then you blend it together. And then you're like, well, what's it from? Well, it's from all of it. Right.
Cumulative.
It's a cumulative
Did you miscarry?
effect. Oh, yeah. I remember I was sitting down to take one of the board exams, and one of my colleagues said to me, so when are you going to have another baby? I'm like, thanks. I just miscarried yesterday. So I had like 4 early miscarriages.
Wow.
And no late miscarriages, thank God. So I have 4 children and then 4 early miscarriages that were like, I had a positive pregnancy test and then it passed.
So what root cause? What was the cause of that? Why couldn't you hold on to that?
Inflammation. Celiac disease is a huge risk factor for miscarriages, bad OB outcome. I checked all these boxes, right? Wow. My first kid was a severely growth restricted preemie, born at 33 weeks.
Wow.
It was like classic. I was classic, poor. So inflammation, depending on how your body's going to show up.
Yeah.
You go down whatever diagnosis or symptom you can go down. And it starts with things like, a little bit of brain fog, a little bit of headaches, a little bit of gut dysfunction, progresses to its worse, severe constipation, diarrhea, reflux GERD. You get a diagnosis now, you have IBS, progresses to maybe you have an autoimmune disease, progresses to cancer or dementia.
Are you a Hashimoto's patient? I mean, you sound typical.
Really? I know. I only have one autoimmune disease.
Well, I hate to win this one, but I've got you beat by 6.
I know this is not I'm just, my heart breaks, right? So no, I don't have, I did have thyroid dysfunction, and I went on medicine for a day and I didn't do well with it. I went on medicine and I was like, rah. And then I learned that, when you have autoimmune disease in general, you don't do so well with the pig derived thyroid medicine because it's got the antibodies, and I went off the cliff. So, and then I was like, you know what, we're going to fix this differently. I wasn't that bad. It was like kind of borderline. So I don't have anything except celiac for autoimmune.
Well, celiac's a big one though.
Yeah.
The reason, because it is pervasive, and I have my my health coaching, a lot of functional medicine people use it, from IIN in New York, Institute of Integrative Nutrition. And they, some actress in Hollywood tells a story of not functioning, not able to go to auditions, couldn't keep relationships, and they all said it was in her head. And so I see that even though I have all these autoimmune conditions, I don't test positive for celiac, but because glyphosate's in the wheat, I don't eat. I've chosen not, I've had no gluten since March 1st. And there's some beautiful sourdough bread in my house right now that's baked from a local bakery. My husband just said at lunch, doesn't bother me at all. And I said, I'm still not going to try it because the glyphosate. So I stay away from it.
But you also have an autoimmune, with the autoimmune stuff, gluten, dairy, soy, sugar, alcohol, top 5, right? Those are the nastiest things you want to put in your body. But the glyphosate is another layer of dysfunction. Absolutely.
So when and then you hear people say, my mother made me, and we had toast for breakfast. I had a sandwich at lunch, and we came home and had pot roast and potatoes and rolls. Yet that student was the one that said, my stomach hurts every day. Oh, it's in your head. Or I really can't think when I take the test. It's in your head. Y'all, it could be celiac. That's why celiac to me almost trumps my others. Obviously, vitiligo is strictly cosmetic. There's nothing about it. It doesn't pain me. It doesn't affect my life, other than I have to wear more makeup on my face when I do on-camera stuff. So what? Right. But celiac is really disruptive because the long-term impact, had you not been diagnosed. So of your 4 kids, do 2 have it?
So okay. So let's talk about this. So first off, it's a spectrum. It's not like on Monday, you're
Yeah.
great. And on
Yeah.
Tuesday, you got celiac. It's a spectrum. You start out perfectly fine. And the end result of the autoimmune dysfunction is a diagnosis called celiac. But the minute you get this diagnosis, it's not like you didn't have this problem. You had the problem long before. You might not have triggered the immune dysfunction in the way that when you finally get the diagnosis. But in order to have celiac, you have the gene. And you can have non-celiac gluten sensitivity, either with or without the gene. So
don't we all have that?
No, not gluten, because it's so rife. So I think sugar's the devil. I think gluten is like the devil's assistant, right? Because it's in everything, and because it converts to sugar, and because it's full of glyphosate. So it's a nasty actor, but intrinsically it's just a food. It's the fact that we overeat it and we overprocessed it and it's more allergenic. And then 40% of the people have the gene that makes them reactive. So you can be reactive before you get celiac. And that reactivity is a problem because it's inflammatory. So having celiac is nasty. So for my kids, I remember this very clearly. I was diagnosed when my second daughter was born. So 17 years ago, I was diagnosed. And fast forward, we went to this Greek restaurant, and I knew that the sauce on the rice had gluten, because how do you make a sauce? You make a roux, you add water to it. Exactly. So I knew that it had wheat. So I didn't eat the rice. But my stepfather got this dish, and my daughters were both like, Grandpa Ron, that looks amazing. Can we have some? So they had his rice and sauce, and they were 2 and 4. So we get the whole way home. They're like, I have a stomach ache. I have a stomach ache. I have a stomach ache. I call the toilet. No, I call the toilet. Okay. We go in. They both go running upstairs, and they go to the same bathroom. And I'm like, how's that going to work? We come in, and they're back to back on the toilet.
Stop it.
Both having diarrhea. I said, there it is. I said the D word. So they're both having diarrhea. And my husband and I looked at each other and we're like, oh my God, they're sensitive to gluten.
Yes. And I'm not laughing at that. I'm laughing.
No, I know. It's just one of those, like, I was like, we should have taken a picture of them back to back on the toilet having diarrhea. I'm sure they would love that in their wedding things, right?
Hearts.
So we took them off gluten and we didn't test them. I didn't yet know that I had 2 genes. So no matter what, they got 1. We took them off gluten, and then we took them off gluten everywhere. We said they had gluten sensitivity. We didn't test them. In between my second and third child, I got tested and learned I had 2 genes, and we were like, oh my God, what have I done? And learned that they automatically had one. It was at that point I did the 23andMe on all of us. I'm like, I want to know what gene you have. So they have the DQ2, which is a little bit more virulent. It's a little more common. 90% of celiacs have DQ2. They both have DQ2. And I didn't test them, but they're both still 15 and 17 years later, they are still really sensitive to gluten. So my oldest says to people, I have celiac, just so they take her seriously.
Good.
Because she feels awful when she has gluten. And the second one gets sick also. So, but she's a little bit less because, we caught her earlier. And then the other 2, we don't give them gluten. We just say to them, you have a very strong family history. You have nasty genes that are epigenetically activated. And they're like, really? Why are we talking about this? And I'm like, because you're at risk. And they do seem to react when they've gotten exposed. They're like, I think I got gluten because I had diarrhea. I'm like, great. Mm-hmm. We don't even give it to you and you're sensitive. So all of them are gluten-free.
You haven't had them go to college. It's very difficult when they have autonomy and agency, which you want them to have. Yep. But it is so pervasive, gluten in the food.
Yes.
It'll be very difficult to eat at.
My oldest is at college, actually. And that was one of the things we chose for school. So my oldest is not a typical teenager, right? You're like, oh, teenagers push the boundary. And I'm like, I'm not saying don't eat gluten, because I really feel strongly that avoidance of pain is a tremendous motivator. So if you eat gluten and you have diarrhea and a headache and joint pain and you're fatigued and your brain doesn't work, why would you do that, right?
Yeah.
So I have never for them been, I manage the people who might feed them. Hey, you can't feed that to them.
Yes.
But going to college, I was like, you're going to make your own choices. But she's like, I don't want to eat that. I feel awful.
Good.
And she's like, I think I got gluten. I'm like, oh, right. We got to get you the enzymes to help you when you get cross-contaminated.
So that is it. Do you keep charcoal or
all of it? Yes. We have a product we call DG Block, and it's got enzymes that help break down gluten. Now, if you eat the sourdough bread, like a whole, half a loaf, it's not going to help you. But if you had some cross-contamination and there's a little bit of dysfunction, that'll cover you, right? So that if I get gluten, I do charcoal. Sometimes I'll do Alka-Seltzer.
Yeah.
It's kind of random.
No.
And then I fast. And I do the sauna. And that seems to, as I have gotten rid of my mycotoxins and my metals, my reactions to gluten. Now, remember, I never eat gluten.
Right.
This is like a cross-contamination kind of thing. If I get cross-contaminated, it used to take me 6 weeks to get better. And I know. You're like, what?
Oh my gosh. It takes us that long to rid our bodies of it?
For me, it took that long to get over it. And as I have gotten rid of these massive toxins, now my reaction is down to, I get evil. Like literally within a half hour, I'm like, why are you speaking?
Mm-hmm. Why are you breathing? Why are you alive?
Right. Why are you even talking to me? And I'm like, oh crap, I got exposed. I get like evil within a half hour, and then I get a headache a half hour later, and then I have diarrhea, and I feel kind of cruddy for the next 12 hours. But I'm kind of grateful. I'm like, oh, it's only 12 hours versus 6 weeks of diarrhea, dysfunction, brain fog, blah, 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 you name it. So I've said it a lot in this talk, huh?
Well, because
the D word.
We call it number 3. There's number 1
number
and number
3,
2.
okay.
And then there's number 3 that those of us who have a sensitivity to the gelato I had a few weeks ago,
Oh.
And I just thought, let me just try it. My husband goes, why do you try things? I think because this is a new day, and it is not. It's a self-correcting error.
Because hope springs eternal. Hope springs eternal, right?
Doesn't it?
Yeah. And so we didn't ultimately test our kids for celiac, but I think the older 2 have celiac, and the oldest one does never cheat. Like, they don't cheat because not cheating. This is just the way they eat because they feel crappy if they eat differently.
Because it doesn't matter if they have the name of, they know what they can and cannot tolerate. That's kind of my COVID experience. I don't get tested because I'm like, I stay home if I don't get tested if I have the flu. You know what I do? I stay home, and that way you don't get infected. I rest, and I repair at home. So
that's very kind of you. Thank you. I don't care if you get tested, but if you then people are like, oh, the test was negative. So I go out. I'm like, but you're still sick.
But you're still sick.
Go home.
It's
don't come in here.
It is not a green light at that point. So but that's my point. It really doesn't matter the name. And we always want to have the feeling of, I'm not my diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to identify with things so much. Well, I can't, I just know I have sensitivity to things, and I know what they are for me, but they may not be for you. Okay. Let's go back to your ultimate detox. What were some of the things you had to do to take the wet washcloth and completely wring it out? I mean, obviously sauna is a part of that.
Lisa. Okay, Lisa, let me just say, you're never going to have a completely wrung out washcloth. That's totally a misnomer.
Okay.
So when you say, what did I had to do? I'm like, I'm still doing it.
Okay.
So if you live on this earth, does anyone not live on this earth? Like everyone lives on this earth. So if you are human and you live on this earth, actually, don't even get me going about our pets. All of our pets have all these issues too.
I know.
So you live on this earth, you get exposed to toxins ongoingly. So you're never going to wring out your washcloth and be like, yep, we're done. Because then you buy a new piece of clothing, buy a new piece of furniture, eat food, drink water, breathe, have EMF exposure, be a stress ball, whatever, right? There's a million toxins. So there's 150,000 unique chemicals. We're exposed to something like 1 to 10,000 a day, depending. Like a car has 10,000 chemicals in it.
So I'm in a new house.
You're
new house
exactly. You're in a new house. So you're in a new house with volatile organic compounds and off-gassing from things and new furniture and plastics, phthalates, flame retardants, blah, blah, blah. So you're never done. Okay. But what I did for 4 years pretty intensively, and it's a process. It's a journey. It's not a destination. You're never going to get there. What you're going to get is, wow, I feel great. Now let's keep it up and continue peeling it off. So I worked very hard to take binders to get rid of the mycotoxins.
Okay.
I'm actually due to retest. The last time I tested, I had gone from 5 strains to 2 strains, and the levels of those strains were significantly lower than what they started at. So I suspect that I'm kind of on my way. But given that 1 out of every 2 buildings has had water damage, when you go to a new building, you have no idea what exposure. You go to the grocery store. I go to the gym down the street and I'm like, there's water on the tiles.
Yes, all the time.
All the time, right? That's water damage. That's mold. So I, even when I'm done, I'm going to continue taking binders. And my favorite binder is the propylmannan fiber, which in our office is called Lean and Clean. But it's the propylmannan konjac tuber fiber, and it binds to all the strains of mycotoxins. It helps bind to metals. So it's kind of this multi-purpose detox support. So there's that. I did, for many years, I did charcoal, chlorella, clay, and Welcol, which is a prescription. I did those 4, 2 of each, 1 to 2 times a day for 4 years. And then I kind of got treatment, and I got treatment fatigue, and I would take a little break. And then I was like, you know what? Why don't I take the propylmannan and the chlorella? Because chlorella is good for metals, propylmannan's good for everything. So, and chlorella is also good for mycotoxins. So I'm really sort of maximizing my usage. So that was the mycotoxin work. And then I did, I did a sort of bar stool treatment for the metals. So one part of the bar stool, improve the liver's ability to process toxins, glutathione, vitamin C, and acetylcysteine, alpha lipoic acid.
High dose of vitamin C?
What do you consider a high dose? I don't actually feel good when I get like 50 grams of vitamin C. It makes me like, I don't feel well. So in order to get it in, it takes like 6 hours and I don't have the time. So high dose, I did the liposomal glutathione and C, 6 pumps of each twice a day.
Okay.
And I've done this for about 4 years.
All right.
That's one part of the bar stool. The next part of the bar stool is bind those toxins. So that's where the fiber, the chlorella, I also took DMSA, which is a prescription binder. Mm-hmm. I also did IVs every once a week to twice a week to once every month, depending on how busy I was. I would just do an IV whenever I could. And I still do IVs, actually.
And so what does an IV do then? Does it help? Is it a binder? Is it the ultimate binder?
Yeah, great question, Lisa. So the IVs that I got were EDTA and DMPS. These are the EDTA is number 1 for binding to lead, and DMPS is number 1 for binding to mercury. And they both bind to the others too. So I got those 2 with alpha lipoic acid and a glutathione push. So I did that. I actually did that last week. And I'll probably do it this week, actually.
Are you doing the NAD plus that all the celebrities are doing?
I'm not. We have it. We do it, but I just don't do it. It's, you have to run it really slowly, and I don't have
2
time
hours
to do a 4-hour IV. Like, I don't have that time.
I've done 2 hours, and I'm about to jump out of my skin.
Yeah, I don't have time for that, but it's great.
I feel good for about 10 days. Yeah. I focus. I have clarity. I really think they should put it in the water. I think it's amazing.
Instead of fluoride.
Yeah, well, I haven't used fluoride in 20 something years. I mean, I knew better because it gave me the periorbital rash. And then I started reading that in the 50s, if you had hyperthyroidism, they gave you a tablet of fluoride to kill your thyroid. And I thought, my thyroid's barely hanging on. Why do anything else to piss it off? So I have never done it. And I don't want to, a dentist telling me better and anything different is like silly. Tell me what people can do. So people listening right now, how can they connect with you? Because you are out of state. And I know that we have silly rules that physicians sometimes can't see people out of state, but how can you treat them? Because you have magical experience here.
Thank you. I'm going to tell my kids. Someone said I was magical.
Yeah, totally. Unicorn experience.
So there's 2 ways to work with me. So I live in Massachusetts and I practice in Massachusetts, and Massachusetts state law requires for the first visit that you be in Massachusetts.
In person.
It can be telehealth, but you got to be in Massachusetts. Kind of weird. But
very weird.
So if you're looking for, okay, let's sort of go big picture. If you're like, I'm really sick, I really need someone who's going to do a deep dive. I need to be a patient. We have a bricks and mortar. It's in Massachusetts. That's called 5journeys.com.
Okay.
And then the majority of people are not going to fall into that bucket. So we have an online brand, drwendie.com, and the doctor is just DR, not doctor spelled out. And on that site, we have programs, we have supplements, we have testing, we have, what else do we have? We have education. It's really meant for a wellness interaction. We can test a little bit of your toxins, but we can't do metals. We can't do that. And so we do things through the drwendie.com. And actually, I have a gift for your listeners that I should tell them about.
We love a gift.
So it's a free gift. And what it gets you is access to a quiz that'll tell you how toxic you are. Chapter 1 of our book, Dirty Girl, that we wrote, which is all about toxins and how to navigate and get rid of them, as well as the non-toxic guide to healthy living. So it's all in one site at drwendie.com/gift. Okay. So that's free. And then on Instagram and Facebook, this is what I'm all about. I'm all about how to feel freaking amazing and live a life in which you make the most profound difference you can to the best of your ability. So on Instagram and Facebook, it's at Wendie Trubow, MD.
Okay. And I will put all of this in the show notes.
Thank you.
MD. Okay.
And I think before we go on any further, I think it's really important that people remember that this is not about perfection. This is about improvement.
Well, it's a constant journey. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean,
but get better. Don't get perfect. Don't get fixed. Get better.
Unless we could go back to our mother's womb for protection. But even there,
you're getting 50% of your mom's toxins. So that's not even protective. That's actually a tox-up event.
Wow.
Nursing and pregnancy and nursing is detox for the woman, but it's a tox-up event for the baby. It's not even really protected then.
Sorry, kids.
I know. I'm like, you got it from your mama. Sorry, baby.
Right. But good personality, great at weddings and bar mitzvahs. There are a lot of things that I've passed down.
Yes.
And so that I've some dirty genes. We can take care of that by seeing Dr. Wendie, getting the book. You've done all the things. Your social media is great. And I will, because it's Wendie. People need to know the Dr. Wendie.
And I'm not French. It's not Trubow like a French.
That's like what it sounds like, though.
I know it sounds like that, but you think of it used to be Trubowitz and take the its off. That's how it was.
And now we understand.
Yeah.
Great conversation today. I love your energy. Love what you're doing for women. I really want women to speak up. One thing we do in the South, Dr. Wendie, is, hi, how are you? Fine. Thank you. That, Southerners never want to ruffle any feathers. I try to tell my clients, friends, peers, go in there and stomp your foot and say, I'm mad as hell, not taking it anymore. I don't feel well. And stop saying, oh, I'm good. No, you're not, or you wouldn't have gone. So now when they come to you, it's different. But I think their first line of defense, and seeing somebody who might practice traditional Western medicine, family practice, is, no, I'm okay. No, you're not okay. You want to know why you have an apron now for a belly. You want to know now why you have, hair growing out of your chin. There's a root cause. And I just really want women.
Nothing, you get nothing. Say some things, you get something.
Yes.
And if they don't listen to you, you're just in the wrong spot, right? Don't go to the sub shop and ask for ice cream. Like, you got to go to the right place.
Go to the sub shop, right? And in my case, don't get the ice cream either, right?
No,
because that didn't end well for us. So, great job today. Thanks for what you're doing, and we'll send everybody to the show notes to get more information.
Thank you for what you're doing. Great to work with you.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to the Lisa Fisher Said podcast. Be sure to hit subscribe and download all the episodes and leave a review, won't you? The Lisa Fisher Said podcast is produced by ClantonCreative.com.